Dear friends, dear readers, dear YouTube followers, welcome in Arouca Press YouTube channel. My name is Gaetano Masciullo. I am historian, philosopher, freelance journalist, and I will guide you through the rich offerings of Arouca Press, exploring works by great authors in its catalog. Let's embark on this journey together. As you know, Arouca Press is a Catholic publisher committed publishing both new and out-of-print gems to aid in reinvigorating the intellectual and devotional life of Catholics in every state of life. And today we have the honor of speaking with Gracjan Kraszewski. Thank you, Gracjan, to be here with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Gracjan is author of three books in Arouca Press catalog. I will show the covers. So the first book is the Hippo Lectures, the Catalan orations. The second one is Seraphim and the Dust Plague. And the third one is Thermonuclear Mirth. So before to talking about these three books, can you briefly present yourself and your works with Vandal Catholics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my background is in American history. I got my PhD from Mississippi State in 2016, and then briefly taught at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Ever since then, I've been out in the Pacific Northwest. I'm in Pullman, Washington. And one of my jobs, like you said, is being director of intellectual formation at Vandal Catholic in Moscow, Idaho. What I do in that role, it's kind of a catch-all, like philosophy, history, whatever it may be. I do a class. This year we're doing a year of St. Augustine. I do a monthly catechetical series along with our pastor, Father Chase Hasenroll. If anyone's interested in any of this, you can just check out vandalcatholic.com. And then finally, the most artistic side of my job is doing this thing called the Hippo Lectures. They're monthly talks named that way because of St. Augustine of Hippo. And so as you showed the first book, that first book that came out, the Hippo Lectures, was a collection of these essays. Seraphim the Dust Plague was 2 Hippo Lectures. And right now I'm working on a long-form story called Mark and Anna about former fashion models who are tasked with by their spiritual advisor of giving these lessons of St. Augustine to the world. So that's my work at Vandal Catholic. It's kind of like in-house college coursework, fiction presentation, catechetical stuff. And then writing, these 3 books I have with Arouca Press. I have 2 others. My first novel, The Holdout, came out in 2018, and then a Civil War history, which is my revised dissertation called Catholic Confederates. So I think I've always had these 2 tracks of being an academic and a writer kind of at the same time.
Yeah. So when and why did you start writing professionally?
Yeah. I think my father is my number one influence. I think it's very much like the way that, the son of a baker or the son of a blacksmith, there's a saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I think that's very, very true. Like my father is like my personal hero and all that kind of stuff on the kind of familial aspect, but also professionally very, very much. And so he is a poet, translator, novelist, English professor, all that. So I think swimming in those waters, growing up around my father, I always thought, oh, well, like the Bible says, right? The Christ says, the son can only do what he sees the father doing. I think that was always that kind of example of like my dad writes, so that's something cool to do. Like I imagine, the son of a filmmaker goes into film or etc. But that was kind of like a background influence. I didn't publish my first story until 2014, which is now 11 years. There's a very short story in this UK short humor blog, and I don't know. I just decided I was in grad school then. I was finishing up my doctorate, and I think a lot of academic work is very kind of research-based, scientific, serious. So I was like, maybe I need to kind of release the pressure valve a little bit and do some artistic stuff. I just started publishing stories, and the great moment for me, I think, with writing, there's 2 moments. It was around the same time. It was around 2015 and 16. The first moment was I read Walker Percy's The Moviegoer, which is a very famous novel in American literature. Actually, very appropriate for the time now. It's a story right before Ash Wednesday, kind of leading up to Ash Wednesday in New Orleans. Walker Percy's The Moviegoer won the 1962 National Book Award. It beat out Joseph Heller's even more famous Catch-22. Walker Percy's The Moviegoer was like a very eye-opening. It was like, wow, like, well, this is great fiction. I wonder if I could do something like this. And my first novel, The Holdout, was very, very kind of indebted to The Moviegoer. First person kind of story, this guy going through this malaise type feel. So that got me to writing my first book. But the great moment for me, and specifically related to Thermonuclear Mirth, was in 2016, I read David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. And I told Alex Barbas in a previous interview, and I think every time I talk about Thermonuclear Mirth, I say the same thing. Infinite Jest really showed me what's possible with fiction. I had finished Thermonuclear Mirth in about 2016 under a different title called Job Search, but it was only about 200, 300 pages. I read Infinite Jest, and I just like tore up the previous copy of Job Search and started totally over. I'm just going to go crazy. I'm going to be really inspired by this kind of free-form postmodern style. And Job Search grew over the course of those next years from 200 pages to 500, 600, 800. Finally became a 1,000-page manuscript when it was sent to Alex, and the final print was 900 pages. But I think like that's the best way to answer your question about, how did I start writing professionally? My father's long-term influence, and then Walker Percy and David Foster Wallace, coming across their work 2015-16.
Okay, so I imagine that the 3 books published with the Arouca Prize have 3 different objectives in a sense. So what do you attempt to achieve with your books?
Yeah, so talking about, you're exactly correct about those 3 books and their objectives. The Hippo Lectures, the first one, is it's a book of essays. It's mainly nonfiction.
Yeah.
Of the 5 books that I've written, 3 are just fiction plain, and even this book of essays, has some fiction in it. So I think I am mainly a fiction writer. But the Hippo Lectures is, again, a compilation of talks that I've given at Vandal Catholic. I also have all these on my YouTube channel, which is simply my name in between maple syrup, maple Gracjan syrup. And on that YouTube channel, there's a playlist called Hippo Lectures and Catholic Topics Talks that are a lot of these talks recorded that we've done at Vandal Catholic over the years. So the intention of this first book is kind of like, all right, here's a Catholic living in America in the 2020s. Because I think it's not enough just to say 21st century now, because people have been, doing 21st century stuff since, Y2K and whatever, right? But like, a Catholic right now, and, what is the kind of Catholic take on cultural issues? I talk about politics, architecture, environment, a lot of different kind of like topics. So the Hippo Lectures is a very kind of informative book of essays, almost journalistic. Seraphim and the Dust Plague is a very small book. It's a novella. So Thermonuclear Mirth is 900 pages, and Hippo Lectures is kind of standard length, like 300. Seraphim and the Dust Plague is 90 pages. You can read it, you can read it in a bathtub, in 2 baths, a hot tub, a hammock. It's like a lazy afternoon, and it's a disaster novella. It's wholly fictional. Basically, just this storm comes through this town, and all the while this storm is approaching, this once in a millennium climatological disaster, all the mayor can think about is this problem of these homeless people. And without giving too much away from the story, of course, the homeless people and Seraphim and angels, there's some kind of connection there. That story tried to ask the question, like, do we see Christ in the poor? Whatsoever you did to the least of, your brethren, you did unto me, that Matthew 25 kind of thing. So it's a kind of like a modern parable. And then Thermonuclear Mirth, we'll see like how my writing career goes. It's all in God's hands, and you do the best you can. And I think it's impossible, especially again at 37 years old, to say like, oh, this is the best book I'll ever write. And in fact, I kind of hope that's not the case. I hope I'm always improving, right? But I think this is kind of like, my magnum opus. Like it's 900 pages. It's 15 years of work. It's basically everything kind of thrown in to this grand, like I'm not at all trying to compare myself to St. Augustine, not at all, obviously. But St. Augustine is very fresh on my mind because, again, at Vandal Catholic, we've been doing this year of St. Augustine. And we had a guest speaker come in, and he made a very good point that he's like, when you read St. Augustine's Corpus, and you go through a lot of stuff, even kind of beginning with his spiritual biography, Confessions, and you're reading like on the Sermon on the Mount, on the Harmony of the Gospels, Trilogy on Faith and Happiness, all this different kind of St. Augustine work. You can find everything St. Augustine wanted to say in City of God, right? City of God is kind of his grand thing. And that's kind of how I look at Thermonuclear Mirth at this point in my career, at least. Like everything I want to say is in that book. It's terribly postmodern. It's horrifyingly postmodern. There's sentences where I purposely have a guy say like, and but so, but wait, so like, just like really kind of like, breaking the syntax apart. One guy monologues for like 80 pages. It's set in the future in the year 2100, but it's not science fiction. And the whole story basically is that this guy worked on the Manhattan Project, hence the title, but it was like a different thing. And as the story is going along, the main vein, the main story is kind of very normal, quotidian. This guy's looking for a job. This guy is he graduated this ridiculous school, and where he studied dog poetry, and he's looking for a normal job. And his job coach, the main character's name is Ben. The job coach's name is Hans, and that's in the main text. But in the footnotes, there's like 200 pages in the footnotes. It starts getting pretty dark. This guy comes onto the scene who's going to end up becoming elected president of the United States, who's kind of like an AI Antichrist figure, where he's basically promising this earthly salvation utopia through robotics and whatever. But again, this sounds very science fiction. I don't like science fiction. I'm not trying to make it science fiction. It's more philosophical, even those parts with the AI guy, than kind of like iRobot stuff. I don't do that. But the narratives kind of intertwine. Multiple narratives will intertwine at the end when there's going to be a kind of a question, and I won't say more, but like it's going to be the first time in history that a pope is going to have to decide, should he use a thermonuclear weapon or not, to kind of like, and how does he even get in control of that? And how does that even happen? And there's connections to this guy's father, who's like a revolutionary in America and created kind of like a state within a state. So Thermonuclear Mirth is a very absurdist, crazy, postmodern, geopolitical, futuristic, but not sci-fi story where I try to do kind of everything at once. And so those are the kind of thrusts of the three book. I think my entire like hope is I'm trying to be a Catholic author who is a practicing Catholic himself, who takes the faith seriously, who wants to present Catholic stuff on face value, but with postmodern language. Because I think like the whole point of the new evangelization, whether it's John Paul II or whoever, is like you have to present, the ancient truths of the faith, but in a new way. Like Thomas Aquinas, when he, was on the scene, he was accused by some of his contemporaries of being too postmodern, and he's departing from Augustine. He's a revolutionary. You always get that, people who are kind of stuck in the past in a bad way. I'm all about good tradition, but I think like sometimes traditional styles are boring. People don't want to engage with them. So I'm trying to use the postmodern language to talk about timeless Catholic truths.
Very interesting. And what style do you adopt with your writing? And are there particular Catholic or secular authors that inspire you?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the earlier, answer and question. I think I can, say with all honesty, my father is kind of my foundational inspiration for just good writing and whatever. And then stylistically, in postmodernity, 100% David Foster Wallace above them all. Like he's my favorite. Other postmodern writers, Thomas Pynchon is fantastic. I very much like Mikhail Bulgakov. He's on, Master Margarita. He's very much on that line between modernity and postmodernity. Specific Catholic writers, Flannery O'Connor is very good. I think Flannery O'Connor, I've said this many times, and God bless Flannery O'Connor, but I think she's kind of overhyped by modern Catholics, like knee-jerk almost. Oh, Flannery O'Connor is so great, and they've never like read her. I think better than Flannery O'Connor, although she's good too, especially her novel Wise Blood is fantastic. Everyone talks about, a good man is hard to find. Whatever. Flannery O'Connor's best story is Wise Blood. I think it's one of her few novels. She was mainly a short story writer, but I think Walker Percy of Catholic writers, even more than G.K. Chesterton, if we're just talking about specific Catholic influences, not secular, it would be G.K. Chesterton and Walker Percy, and Walker Percy more than Chesterton. When I was in grad school, again, kind of on the two parallel tracks, when I was working towards my PhD and doing all the academic work, I got into reading a lot of kind of the great Catholic writers, and I read all of Chesterton. He's very good, but I think Percy, the moviegoer, Lost in the Cosmos, Message in the Bottle, and especially his Love in the Ruins. If anyone's interested in reading Walker Percy beyond the moviegoer is his most famous one, but Lost in the Love in the Ruins, The Adventures of a Bad Catholic at the End of the World is kind of a fantastic a book. So I'd say those are kind of my most profound influences. And then you asked about in terms of style, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I do have a distinct style. It's been very nice. I've seen some reviews of things I've written, and actually, there was recently an Italian review of Seraphim the Dust Plague a couple of months ago, and the review was like, something like, I enjoyed the book and etc. And like here's the strengths, here's the weaknesses, but I enjoyed his distinct style or whatever, something like that. It was like made me feel good. I was like, okay, like I think my style is almost like I'm not trying to be funny, but it has this kind of like comedic absurdity thing that I can't help myself. And it's maximalist as well. Like I 100% again have no problem with being super exploratory with footnotes and bombastic and over the top. But I would say my style mirrors almost I don't want to call it schizophrenia, but kind of the dichotomy of my professional work. When I write academic work, if you read my book Catholic Confederates, it's very boring and scientific. It's very straightforward. So if I'm writing academic work, my style is almost styleless. Like the style is absent. It's very straightforward, almost like Ernest Hemingway journalism, Kansas City Star style guide. Just short sentences, declarative. Just you're writing history. But my fiction style is more kind of like broken apart and very postmodern.
Yeah. Do you think the state of Catholic literature is in crisis? And if so, how would you assess the state of Catholic literature today, if possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll give the kind of comedic answer first of like, yes, it's in crisis, and I'm the only author that has the answers, so everyone has to buy my books. The serious answer is, though, I definitely think it's in crisis, and I would never want to insult anyone. I myself, maybe offended is the wrong word, but I would be maybe hurt or whatever if some guy went on an interview and he was like, there are no good Catholic writers today. No one's writing good fiction. I would feel like, wait a second, what about me? So I don't want to say that towards other authors. It's very possible there are other Catholic writers out there, along with myself, who have the same kind of intention of like trying to write serious. I'm trying to write serious Catholic stuff, and that's not like patting myself on the back. I'll juxtapose that to why I think Catholic literature is in crisis. Most Catholic books today are kind of Catholic self-help, right? Here's the 5 ways to make your Lent better. They're spiritual autobiography, and not to offend anyone, but often people that no one has heard about. Here's my story, whatever, who cares? So Catholic self-help, spiritual autobiography, a famous priest, again, more kind of like tips about how to pray better. Very good stuff, but that's usually just Catholic writing in general. And then Catholic literature, point number 4, is often like dragons, fairy tales, stories for kids, and it's like, that's awesome. I have 2 young boys. I love reading them, the Narnia, C.S. Lewis stuff, and Lord of the Rings, J.R. Tolkien. That's wonderful. But I think Catholic literature today is just like very dumbed down, juvenile, kind of like, so this guy, he was a knight and he fought this dragon and won the lady's hand in marriage. I'm trying to write serious Catholic writing in that style, like a Walker Percy. Things my writing is 100% for adults. There is no question that there are some very smart the students that I teach. I have some students who are 19, 20 years old who are brilliant, who are very capable and all that kind of stuff. But I would say my intended audience is almost like a minimum age of like 28. People in their 30s, 40s, kind of people who've lived life. It's not the kind of like, hey, so you're in high school and here, like, it's none of that kind of stuff. That's why Catholic literature is in crisis. Is everything is aimed kind of at like young adults and youth groups and stuff. And I don't know if there's a lot of people trying to write serious stuff. There's this guy, I have to check him out. I've met him once met him once in person. His name is Joshua Wren. I think that's how you pronounce his name, Hren. But he's some kind of professor, I think, at St. Thomas in Texas, I believe. And I met him actually once at the University of Mary, where I think he used to be faculty. Met him briefly, kind of like I was there interviewing for a job, actually. And he was on the kind of search committee, and we were out at dinner together. Joshua Wren, I want to give him a shout out. He's written a recent novel called like Infinite Regress. And I think he has a couple books. So here's Joshua Wren. Maybe he's one of these guys too, who's trying to like stem the tide of bad Catholic literature. Joshua Wren trying to write good Catholic literature. And kind of where I started this answer, I wouldn't want to offend Catholic writers who are trying the same way, but are not very well known. I myself am not very well known. So I don't want to paint with too broad a brush and say like, oh, there's no one doing stuff. But it does feel that way. It does feel like Catholic literature is very much in crisis, and no one is doing anything because people are just writing kind of Catholic self-help, 5 steps to prayer, or knights and fairy tale story for teenage kids. And so, yeah, I think I would love to be part of that kind of renaissance of good, serious Catholic writing.
So, one of the main themes in thermonuclear myth is, as you told before, the Antichrist. Do you think we are living in an Antichrist age?
I think that's impossible to say. One of my favorite authors, another favorite author, had a great book through one of his great point through one of his characters, and he's this old guy, and he's like summing up. He had become like very wary with the world, and he's like, "But I'm a Catholic. I believe it all. You know, like no matter how much my faith ebbs and flows, how much grace I respond to or not, I believe it all. I believe it all. I'm a devout Catholic. God help me. I believe all this, will come to pass. There will be an actual Antichrist who will come. And, thank God we already know Christ has won the victory once and for all, with his death and resurrection. But, the Antichrist will come. All these things are real. I have no 0% patience for oh, these things are symbolic, whatever. No, I think these are all real things. That being said, I have no idea. I love how Christ says in the Gospels, only the Father knows the hour of the end of the world. And so you have all these Protestant guys who put up these, especially in America, it's very popular, this kind of like billboards, the end is near, repent now. And there is no question, all of us daily, the Benedictine monks, the Desert Fathers, I think are some of the most inspirational people. They're, repenting daily. We should every day be doing acts of contrition, penances, because, whether the world is going to end soon or not, our world will end soon, right? Even if you live to be 100 years old, you're going to die. Your world will end. So you should prepare to meet God 100%. But there's no way I can answer the question, are we living in the time of the Antichrist or not? I bet people thought that in the First World War, when the whole world went mad and everyone was killed. I bet people thought, the Napoleonic era was the end of times. How about, the actual Dark Ages, 476, when the Roman Empire fell. So is there a lot of evil in the world now and stuff? Of course. Does that mean it's the end times? No. Can anyone know when the end times happen? Not if you're a serious practicing Christian, because the scripture itself says only the Father knows, right? So I have no idea. And I think there's too many Catholics often who are all too ready to be to post kind of a clickbait YouTube video, right? The world's over now. This guy said this cardinal said this, and it's only God knows.
Yeah. Furthermore, scripture says that there are a lot of antichrists.
Right.
So we should not think that the Antichrist will be only in the end of time.
Right.
We think about Stalin, Pol Pot, Hitler, they all were antichrists.
Right.
James, I think, writes, no, John, in one of the letters of John, Apostle, he writes, the Antichrist is who denies the Father and the Son. So it is a very general identikit, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Gracjan, for this talking. To our readers, I encourage you to delve into these 3 books. You can find them in the Arouca Press website. I show you the covers again. So the Hippo Lectures, the Catholic Catalan Orations, Seraphim and the Dust Plague, and Thermonuclear Mirth. Until next time, may we all continue seeking truth with courage and faith. Thank you, Gracjan.
Thank you so much.
Bye.